How much is your attention worth? You ought to know the biggest companies in the world are making their money off of it. In his new book, The Siren's Call, Chris Hayes argues that our attention, what we choose to see and hear and notice, is both the most valuable resource in the world and the very thing that makes us human. The attention economy is where social media companies and advertisers vie for the right to every millimeter of space in our minds. And because the attention they're fighting for is so important to us, this is a big problem. Chris Hayes explains, quote, "We are built and formed by attention, destroyed and by neglect. This is our shared and inescapable human fate. Now our deepest neurological structures, human evolutionary inheritances, and social impulses are in a habitat designed to prey upon, to cultivate, distort, or destroy that which most fundamentally makes us human." End quote. Still with me, Chris Hayes, my friend, colleague, and host of All In right here on MSNBC, weekdays at 8 p.m. Eastern. And, of course, he's the author of the aforementioned book, The Siren's Call, How Attention Became the World's Most Endangered Resource, which has got a cover that's made up of the very nice Velshi green color. So I appreciate that, Chris. Let me read a line from your introduction where you're describing why you call it the Siren's Call. You say attention, and we're talking about attention here. Attention is the substance of life. Every moment we are awake, we are paying attention to something, whether through our affirmative choice or because something or someone has compelled it. Ultimately, these instants of attention accrue into a life. My experience, as William James wrote in The Principles of Psychology in 1890, is what I agree to attend to. Increasingly, it feels as if our experience is something we don't fully agree to, and the ubiquity of that sensation represents a kind of rupture. And that's your point, that I don't control my attention. You'd think as a thinking human that you do, but your argument is increasingly we don't.
Yeah, I mean, what makes attention so tricky is both it's so foundational. In every instant of our lives, we're going to pay attention to something. And as I said, that's basically what your life is. But it has there are these sort of two different aspects of the faculty. One is intentional or voluntary attention. Like right now, I'm listening to you, you're listening to me. If you're, engaged in some task, if you're really, focused on a meeting at work, or you're watching your kids perform, that's voluntary attention. But the other faculty we have, and in some ways the evolutionary kernel of this faculty, is that involuntary attention. If you're walking across the street looking at your phone and a car honks, you pay attention to the car honking, right, or the siren going down the street without getting to choose whether you will or not. And that ability to have our attention taken away from us without us knowing it, which is a sort of evolutionary necessity, is also the foundation upon which this entire form of attention capitalism is being built, such that we're constantly being pulled by things that we don't feel we have control over to pay attention to.
Right. And you use the example of sirens because if you hear a siren wherever you are in the world, sounds a little different, but everybody knows that's a siren. That's an ambulance. That's a police car. Explain what you describe as the attention economy. You use a slot machine analogy.
Yeah, I mean, what we have are when you have competitive attention markets, people are trying to get your attention, right? They end up selecting for that form of compelled attention through what I call iterative interruption, right? So the slot machine is a great example of where this all sort of drives towards. The slot machine can keep someone in the seat for 8 hours, but it never tells a story. It never holds attention in any little increment longer than a few seconds. What it does is it uses that sort of evolutionary kernel for being aware of interruption to interrupt, resolve, interrupt, resolve. That interrupt and resolve method of keeping attention is increasingly the dominant one in the social media age. It's what the platforms have engineered towards, and they're managing to keep billions of users and trillions of human attentional minutes through this kind of repeated interruption.
Chris, you talk about the attention age, and as you call it, a race to the bottom. Let me read from your book in which you say attention ascends from a means to an end to the end itself. If you can't be heard, it doesn't matter what you say. And right now, it's both easier than ever to shout and harder than ever to be heard. The incentives of the attention age create a new model for public debate in which attention is its own end to be grabbed by any means necessary. It's a simple paragraph, and yet it speaks so much to exactly where we are today. Is there a fix for this, or are you just describing this is how we're evolving?
I mean, the fix, I think, is multi-layered. There's all sorts of ways that we have to sort of in personal life, through a regulatory regime, rethink how we're regulating attention. But this point about public discourse, which right now it feels like we're very trapped in, is the idea that all human interaction relies on what I call in the book attentional regimes. Like right now, you and I have one, right? Every conversation has turn taking, right? And if you don't have that, like if you're on a date and that doesn't happen, it's a terrible date, right? If you're in a classroom where there's not an attentional regime, no learning gets done.
Right.
What we've seen at the level of public discourse is this total breakdown of attentional regimes. And what it means is that people that just are good at getting attention in and of itself, Donald Trump's appalling spectacle in the Oval Office the other day, Elon Musk with the platform he purchased, they achieve this kind of attentional dominance in this environment. And what other people outside of it have to do, which you did in your really excellent open, is to kind of pull back and choose what we are focusing on and recreate attentional regimes in our own discourse as a kind of reaction to that.
Chris, it's a wonderful book, and it's a treat to have you here on a weekend morning. I appreciate it, and thank you. Congratulations.
I loved it.
And good to see you, my buddy.
Great. I'm a big fan, man. Thanks so much.
Chris Hayes is the host of All In with Chris Hayes here on MSNBC, author of the new book, The Siren's Call, How Attention Became